Hello and welcome to another episode of Phineas Former is a Furry, hosted by Phineas Former. I am Phineas Former, and I am a furry, so you don't have to be. Today we've got a really fantastic episode for us, and if we'll remember, in our last episode, we spoke about my kind of involvement and my discovery of the furry fandom back in my early days. How did I find the furry fandom? When did I kind of start realizing how much of a part it was of me? And that's something that we talked about in the last episode, was where I began with the furry fandom. I would like now to speak a little bit about when the first time was that I really understood myself to be a furry. Not just when I found the fandom or when I was trying to get a little bit more into it, when I got to a fursuit, my first convention. There's so many firsts to run over during our little time here on this podcast. And the one that's important for me right now is I think it's important to talk about the first time I knew I was a furry. Because for a lot of people, the furry fandom is a matter of identity. A lot of people get a lot out of the furry fandom, as well they should. There's so much really great stuff that happens in this fandom, and you can make some fantastic connections. Really awesome things are possible with the furry fandom and senses of identity. And the first time I really understood myself in kind of an identity capacity to be a furry. That seems really important to talk about, and I'm curious if any of our listeners out there have kind of a similar experience. It's going to be strange for me, though, because this experience I'm going to describe took place about 3 weeks ago or so. I was cleaning my room, which I was not happy about, and I was finally starting to unpack the last box. I've recently moved, and I, of course, in the corner of my room had a box of just the miscellany that I didn't have a place for when I brought them to my new place. And then when I'm unpacking this box, I don't have a place for that stuff either, so why would I unpack the box? And as I was going through that memorabilia and really getting the final pieces of my room in order, I looked about once I was done with that task, and I realized the sheer amount of furry memorabilia that I have. I have a very large blanket that has all of the big cats on it, as well as a puma. I've got a Dakimura pillow of a character named Kaz, super just sweet boy. My kind of chest of drawers has a cougar blanket draped over it. I have on display a few silicone sculptures, which is something that many furries are going to have. I've got two Whispers poster, a Sonic the Hedgehog poster, which doesn't necessarily have to be furry, but it's Sonic and Tails. And the more Tails you get, the more furry you get, that's for sure, I want to say. I think most of us will agree on that one. There was a deck of cards called Kennel Club, and I have one of 500 that were ever made. I think it was a charity gig at first. I'm not quite positive on that. But a limited run of collectors playing cards. My fursuit head is on display kind of nearby my bed, and then the fursuit itself is hanging up on the closet, of course. And then to our viewers on the YouTube side, and remember this is a fake podcast, so there's only the viewers on the YouTube side. I don't want to get anyone to be confused on that right now. This is a fake podcast, absolutely. My visuals feel really bugged out in this world, so there's going to be a bit of a visual disruption as I try and transition us into a different world that might be a little bit more stable, so I do apologize for that interruption real quick. But we are actually going to take that moment to, might as well segue into the ad break, which we do actually have for the first time, a sponsor for the show, which is exciting. So we're going to hit that and then come back to a different studio while I finish out this story about 3 weeks ago when I first really discovered I was a furry. See you guys there. Hi guys, Phineas Former, the producer here, to tell you about the sponsor of today's video is Phineas Former. Phineas Former is a new and upcoming YouTube channel hosted by, I think, hang on, give me one. Okay, yeah. So it's hosted by a guy named Phineas Former. Super cool, hair the color of clouds, got a pink shoulder and a blue leg. We really like Phineas Former, and he's a good friend of the program, actually. The podcast, Phineas Former is a Furry, hosted by Phineas Former. Super awesome. We love this guy. I've met him. I've stayed at Phineas's house. And this guy, he's genuine. He's the real deal. You're going to want to check out his YouTube channel. He covers all sorts of wide topics. Sometimes gets nice and esoteric. You got your philosophical thoughts there. You've got kind of like your silly thoughts. He's got a little bit of everything there. Good family-friendly channel. He's got all of the values that you're going to want to embody in your own life. I swear, I love this guy. So you got to go check out Phineas Former, brand new YouTube channel over at youtube.com/@PhineasFormer. You're not going to want to miss it. And he has a new fake podcast series called Phineas Former is a Furry, where he talks about himself as a furry member of the fandom, I suppose. It hasn't been released yet, but what am I even talking about? Yeah, Phineas Former. You want to go check it out. Thanks for being a friend of the program. And now that's going to get right back to the podcast with Phineas Former. All right, that's going to be a quick little shout out to my producer, Phineas, for kind of handling some of that transition and sourcing out the new recording studio to finish out this episode of the podcast. Really appreciate that. I work with an awesome team here, and it really does take a village to pull off a production like this. So big thanks to my producers, and then big thanks to our viewers at home for bearing with us. Let's get kind of right back to it, though, because if you'll remember, we're still talking about the time that I really came to identify and realize that I am a furry. Not just it's a hobby or something that I'm interested in, but genuinely to look around my room and recognize I am, in fact, a furry. And that seems like it's going to be pretty strange. I make furry content. I am clearly a furry. I have a fursuit. I've been to many conventions. I have a few YouTube channels where I present myself as a furry. I've written furry stories, including many which are adult themed. I am a furry. Like, I am as furry as it gets. How fascinating, then, that it did legitimately take me most of a lifetime, and I think at this point, almost a majority of it actually, spent as a member of the furry fandom. And that's kind of cool to know that, but it was only for the first time when I was cleaning my room after freshly moving into the new space of life where I'm able to express myself and be more of who I am. And it's the first time I've been living on my own, effectively. And it's been really cool seeing what happens when I'm able to just express myself in the place where I live and in my environment and in my bedroom even, without having to be concerned about how I express myself. And this does mean that even during the entire time of making my videos, writing my stories, and being a furry, I haven't recognized myself as a furry. This is even the second episode of my fake furry podcast, and I'm new to considering myself a member of the furry fandom. That's so strange to me, and it really is the sort of a situation where I just woke up one day about 3 weeks ago. It was probably a little bit over at that point, but it was such a unique moment that I am a furry. It's not just I have a furry VTubing channel, and not just that I have a fursuit and a few blankets that have animals on them. And I've got a Pusheen onesie that's a dragon, and I have another onesie that's just like a pink leopard. Like, I'm there. I'm in it. I've got the thigh highs. I've got everything that you need. I've got the collar that lights up, LEDs. I'm there. And there's two directions to take that thought. The first one, I don't love quite as much, where we can define ourselves by the clothing that we wear and the brands that we have and the things that we buy. We live in a consumerist world. So you can look at the room of furry paraphernalia that I've gathered, like, oh, wow, this man just buys lots of furry things, which is true. When I can, I do. But I really feel like that kind of a lens is short-sighted and might even be missing the point entirely. Because when I looked around my room that fateful day a handful of weeks ago, I didn't see all of the furry garbage that I had purchased over the years. I saw a guy who chose to purchase the furry garbage. That's a small distinction, but that's actually radically important. I cannot express how important it really is. Because there's not very many ways to express oneself in the world. You have to have the right groups of friends. You have to have the confidence to wear the right sorts of outfits. You have to have the manners of speech. Like, you have to have the way of speaking in order to say the words that can define who you are. It can be hard to express yourself. And one of the ways that we do have to express ourselves, and kind of the chief way we have in the world that we live in, is the things that you buy. The choices of what you buy then do help to inform who you are, who you're going to be. And I recognized 3 weeks ago that during a lifetime of choices of what to purchase, I've consistently bought enough furry things, which speaks to an identity of a guy who wants to buy furry things. The reason I like this so much, well, I guess maybe it's like a chicken and the egg situation a little bit. You can buy things which are furry because you're a furry, and so clearly I'm going to want the Whispers poster. I'm a furry, and you need to have, a fursuit if you're a furry, or that's the stuff that you're going to buy because you're a furry. You buy furry books, for instance. Or if you just really like furry media, you can purchase furry books and then accidentally, oh, well, I guess I must be a furry, or maybe you can just decide to call yourself that. There's loads of ways to identify with the furry fandom. The reason it's so interesting to me, though, is I had gone through a furry phase, and I've been a furry on and off for 16 years now or so. Sometimes I'll hit the fandom really hard. I'll go to 2 conventions in 2 or 3 years. Then I'll drop off and I won't really do anything furry for 5 or 6 years. It's a hobby that comes and goes, kind of like everything else, I suppose. And yet, even during all of those off periods in life when I was not really trying to be a member of the furry fandom and it had just taken kind of a lull for me, I suppose, I was still buying blankets with animals on them. And you don't have to be a furry to appreciate thigh highs. I got those separately. And loads of people appreciate Sonic. It doesn't have to be a furry thing. Of course not that I bought a Sonic poster that had Sonic and Tails and Knuckles. It was a Sonic 2 poster and it was really well stylized. And the reason I'm a member of the furry fandom ultimately is because, A, I love people, and you find people in the furry fandom, of course you do. So I love people, but I love animals. And when I wasn't a part of the furry fandom, I was still buying animal stuff because I really like animals. And I realized only recently, and I had like a little folding chair that had like a little paw print pattern on it. Not because I'm a furry, so I need the chair that has paw prints on it, but because I like chairs with paw prints on it, because I like animals. Even during a lot of the parts of life that I've been accumulating things when I wasn't trying to be a furry and wear that as a part of my identity, and I've been in periods of life where it was really important to me to try to identify with the furry fandom. That's something I've tried out, and it never felt quite right. It was almost like I was trying to be a furry more than I was trying to be myself. Phineas Former is a furry, but I am Phineas Former first, who is a furry, not I am a furry. It wasn't like a full on identity thing. But down to the core, whether or not I identified as a furry, I still had loads of animal stuff. And now that I'm in a point of life, quite decidedly so, that I am a furry, in case you couldn't tell, it's the name of the podcast for crying out loud. I'm super duper a furry right now. Are you kidding me? It was only by taking breaks from the furry fandom, coming back and really looking at my room and the things that I'd purchased and the life I decided to live while stepping away from the furry fandom, that I realized I'm actually far more at home here than I ever thought that I was. And to this day, I don't carry an identity of a member of the furry fandom with me deep in my heart. It doesn't really help to define who I am. It's a series of actions that I do. I spend a lot of time doing furry things, but it's not a part of me, and it's not a furry channel. This series is the only time I really talk about being a furry on the channel where I am a furry VTuber. It was only a few weeks ago when I looked around my room and I really had that moment that being a furry has become so much a part of who I am, I think, that I don't even recognize it's a part of who I am. And that in small ways, even during parts of life that I have not been participating in the furry fandom, I have still been a furry and getting furry things, but really it's just animal paraphernalia because I like animals. I like onesies that are a pink tiger. Come at me. I love I love animal stuff. I love paw prints. That's why I keep getting paw print tattoos. I think I've got 6. 5. I have 5 paw print tattoos. And I have those not because I'm a furry, but because I love animals. I got one because I was a furry, maybe two back when I was in the identify with the fandom part of my life. But I still just got paw prints because I love animals. They just mean a lot to me, and it's just a symbol that I really like. To me, it's really playful, and that's why I have a few of those. Not because I'm a furry, just because I like that aesthetic and I like animals a whole bunch. And I have animal print too. I have leopard print on my shoulder. And to me, the reason I wanted to make this episode is because of how kind of stark it is, I think. I've never really fit in as a furry when I was trying to wear it as a part of my identity. And I've come and gone in the fandom a few times, and each time it's kind of like I was trying on a new skin. Not a new skin, but I was just really seeing maybe this time I jive with it more. Maybe this time I'll connect with people. And that's how I've always really viewed my journeys into the furry fandom, is when I try to join and be part of it again, it feels like a really active effort, I suppose. But when I stepped back and just looked at the facts of the matter, I'm a furry whether I'm really interacting with furries a ton or not. Whether I consider myself a furry is well outside of the question. I am a furry, it's just not a big deal to me. And during the times of life when being a furry was a big deal to me, and I was trying to make it work, and I was trying to make furry friends, it didn't feel very right. I felt really alone in the furry fandom, and I think that's because I was trying too hard. I was trying to be a furry, not trying to be myself. I accidentally zoomed in the camera just then, but we're close enough to the end of the episode that I think we're just going to wrap it up and probably keep this framing how it is. So I apologize for the close-up, but hopefully we can enjoy it for the happy accident that it is. How interesting it is, as my closing thoughts to this little episode here, that during the times of life I wanted to be a furry, and I was really trying to be a furry, and I went to fur meets, and I went to conventions, and I got the fursuit, and I was really trying to make furry friends to fit in with people, that I felt like I didn't really fit in with people, and I did not understand that. How magnificent now that I look at my room and the person I've accidentally found myself being, even while I was not trying to be a furry, I look around and my room has so much gosh darn furry stuff in it. Some of it I did acquire while I was trying to be a furry, but a lot of it is just stuff that I came into anyway. I have to buy a blanket, I might as well get animals on it. I have to get a towel, I have leopard print pink towels, or purple towels that are leopard print, not because I was a furry, just because I like them. Then I look around and realize how much of a furry I really am, and how effortless it turned out to be when I focused instead on just trying to be me. That's my relation with the furry fandom, and it's kind of strange because I found it as I first tried relating to me. I don't know how that's going to be able to inform your views or aspects of the furry fandom, but I think what I really want to say with this episode is to anyone out there who similarly is a furry and is trying to make friends in the furry fandom and wants to know more about it and how do you fit in and all sorts of questions like that. There's so many ways to take a podcast, a fake podcast, about being a furry and how I relate to it. The way I relate to it is by relating within myself first. Find out not even what the furry fandom means to me, but find out what things mean enough to me that the furry fandom makes sense. Why I want to fit in with the furry fandom. And why I like animals and what kind of animals do I like. And maybe you don't even need to know why, but I would cement that love first and then worry about where you fit in with the furry community. Because if you know how to fit in with yourself a little bit and you can buy things which are furry for yourself, that's going to mean a lot more. It's going to be a lot more powerful. And I think now I could go into relationships with furries and be a lot more cool and centered because while I am deeply a furry, it doesn't have any direct bearing on me or my life because it's not something I'm actively trying to be part of. It's just part of me. to find that, I really, I guess, stepped away from the fandom and stepped back in and did that enough times to learn how I relate to it. But to anyone else out there who is in a point where they're not sure how they identify with the furry fandom and they really want to know how to fit in more, I mean, it's not easy, but I would try and figure out, how do you fit in with yourself? What does being a furry mean to you? And come at it from that lens. And respect being a furry on the grounds that mean a lot to you, which might look like writing stories or being a furry VTuber, doing furry podcasts. I think making art is really important, but figure out what your connection is to the fandom personally. And then when you do interact with the fandom, you can bring that connection into it. For instance, I don't really have any furry friends. There's a few people I need to apologize to when I say that, but I feel like I don't have any furry friends, at least. But when I do talk with furries, I'm going to be able to see, oh, hey, this is what I do as a member of the furry fandom, and we have something to bond over. And that's really cool that I have a fake podcast, as an example, and that I've become like a VTuber, and I have furry things under my belt that I've done because they mean a lot to me. And that's going to mean much more in a conversational sense than just being a furry and liking the art. If you like the art, that's fantastic, but what do you do about it? And how does it relate to you? So in the comment section, and I don't really do calls to action very frequently, but why don't we drop off a comment down below and maybe respond to other people's comments? A little bit of discourse here would be really cool, I think. Or you could drop me a line in one of my DMs on, say, Blue Sky as just an example, because I want to hear your stories. I want to hear what you guys have going on out there, how you relate to the furry fandom, and if you feel like you're trying to fit in really hard, like I was for a long time, or if it's something that's much more casual to you, and kind of what your relationship is to being a furry for yourself. Because for me, it became a pretty casual affair, so much so that I didn't realize how much of a part of me it really is. And that was a video that I felt like making. Also, please let me know what other kind of furry episodes you would like on Phineas Former is a Furry, the fake podcast hosted by Phineas Former. He's a furry, so you don't have to be. Because I have a fursuit, I've got thoughts on that. I've been to conventions, I've got thoughts on that. I'm a furry VTuber, I've got thoughts on that. The different types of paraphernalia, how often do I wear my fursuit? Are leg warmers really what they're meant to be, So many different thoughts, and there will be more episodes of this just when the time comes out, because I love this fake little podcast, and I don't talk about being a furry, and it's really enjoyable to me. So let me know what kind of furry subjects you would like covered in the next episode, and share some of your furry experiences down below. I'd love to check them out, and I hope that we all just kind of have a cool little community, a little conversation about that. Sounds really interesting to me. And all of that said, this has been Phineas Former is a Furry, a fake podcast hosted by Phineas Former. I'm a furry, so you don't have to be. I'll talk to you guys later.